Saturday, June the 20th is World Refugee Day. The world is facing the worst refugee crisis in modern times, and the global response has been woefully inadequate, according to the latest annual report from the UN High Commission for Refugees. Humanitarian groups are now calling for a global summit to address the crisis. Henry Ridgwell reports from London.
The United Nations says by the end of 2014, more than 60 million people were forced to flee their homes, the biggest displacement of people ever recorded. Sameh and his family fled war in Syria. They were rescued from a boat in the Mediterranean this week and taken to Italy.
Every human on this planet loves their country, but the situation in Syria would force anyone to look for safe shelter in a safe country, for themselves, for their wife, for their children.
More than 100,000 migrants have crossed the Mediterranean to Europe this year. Nearly 2,000 have died. Europe's crisis is far from the full picture, says UN High Commission for Refugees spokesman Andrej Mahecic.
The Mediterranean is only perhaps the visible consequence of what we are seeing globally. Let's not forget that 86% of the world's refugees are hosted by the developing nations. For example, Syria has been the single largest driver of displacement over the past 4 years. Most of the Syrians have found refugees in the neighboring countries, nearly 4 million of them.
Syria's neighbours, like Turkey, are trying to stem the flow of refugees. They have received little support from the international community, says Anna Shea of Amnesty International.
In Lebanon, 1 in 5 people is now a refugee. In Turkey has the largest Syrian refugee population at over 1.7 million people. So in the face of this massive influx of people in a short amount of time, countries are really resorting to troubling measures.
The group describes Africa's refugees as the world's forgotten crisis. There are more than 3 million in sub-Saharan Africa.
What's really striking is that a lot of countries are both the source and destination for refugees. So countries that are persecuting people and where people are suffering human rights abuses are themselves welcoming refugees because there's nowhere else for these people to go.
Shea says the inadequacy of the global response was highlighted last month as thousands of ethnic Rohingya refugees from Myanmar were left drifting in the Andaman Sea for weeks because no country would accept them. Indonesia and Malaysia have now offered temporary resettlement. The UN's Mahecic says the world is entering a dangerous era in which the humanitarian response is dwarfed by the scale of the refugee crisis.
Over the past 5 years, 15 conflicts erupted in various parts of the world, 8 of them in Africa alone, 3 in the Middle East, just to name Syria, Iraq, Yemen, another one in Europe, Ukraine. This unprecedented displacement requires an unprecedented response.
Mahecic says the only long-term hope is a political solution, but many of these conflicts are intensifying and the number of people forced to flee for their lives continues to grow. Henry Ridgwell for VOA News, London.
Well, Texas has become a favored place for refugee resettlement. 10% of the refugees in the United States live in the state, and most of them in Houston. VOA's Greg Flakus attended a World Refugee Day celebration in the city where visitors enjoyed music, dancing, and food.
World Refugee Day was a big party for people who left everything behind to find a new home here in Houston. Sania Lakpati, who works with the Catholic Charities Refugee Program, organized this year's event held at the University of St. Thomas.
They left behind a lot, and now they're here resettling into a new home. And Houston has more refugees than any other city or state. Many Houstonians actually don't know that. And this is an opportunity for us to come together once a year and celebrate them.
But most refugees avoid talking about what compelled them to leave their country, like this woman who escaped genocide in the Darfur region of Sudan.
It's very bad.
Refugees don't want to tell their story, they don't want to relive it, and it's already difficult for them to resettle because a lot of them don't speak English. So you have engineers and doctors working labor jobs just to get started and, to make life for their family.
One thing that helps is the increasing diversity of Houston's population. Zain Alatar, who works with the YMCA's refugee program, speaks Arabic and several other languages.
I was kind of raised in a pretty strictly multicultural, multilingual environment. And so now I help out with the refugees, and I enjoy supporting the cause.
Refugees from various countries find common ground playing football, called soccer here in the United States. So World Refugee Day planners also brought teams from various nationalities together in a park for a set of games. This team, called Texas Lions, is made up of East African refugees.
2, 3, Texas Lions!
This team, made up of players from Cuba, Algeria, and Iraq, also includes women like Romy from Honduras, who works with Interfaith Ministries.
I just want to have fun and see people from other agencies, because we don't talk that much with them, and I would like to meet them.
At the celebration, too, refugees came together to support each other and embrace their new beginning in a new homeland. Greg Flakus, VOA News, Houston.